wonder if the vanity filters I add to my video make me seem vapid. I'm only protecting the viewer's eyeballs from my ugly, but I'm also revealing my insecurity. How embarrassing. Oh, hi! Enjoy the show. Welcome, Smarties. It's a gorgeous, cold, sunny November day here in Texas, and I want to recommend to you Before the Thin Man by Christopher Allen. Drop me a comment, have you ever read a prequel, and was it as good as the original? I wanted to let y'all know that as of November 2025, my husband and I are finalists in a local writing competition. We don't know how many finalists there are, but I'll let y'all know how it goes in a few weeks. About the author. A post on Allen's blog reveals that he had a similar career to Hammett. After working a long time as a police officer, Allen eventually became a private detective. He says he feels a deep connection to the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, and especially to Hammett himself. Several teasers from his other stories are posted on his blog, and there are places to leave comments underneath them. Let's set the expectation here. As I've said before, I don't know nothing about nothing.
She knows nothing.
I haven't even published my two-part mystery yet, but I love writing and I love reading, so this entire video is just me having fun talking with you about a book that I think you'll enjoy if you're a fan of mysteries. Since we're all smart here, we know it's easier to critique and criticize someone else's work, but none of my commentary is meant to be rude. I'm being goofy and hopefully can convince y'all to buy this fun book. Does this read like a novel or screenplay by Hammett? Not quite. Someone's writing style is like a fingerprint. You can create something similar, but never exactly the same, and that's okay. Allen clearly loves Hammett's stories, and this is a great homage. Printing quality. I think this book was self-published. There are no acknowledgments, no author bio, no editor listed, and I couldn't find anything satisfactory about the name Chris A. Cannon online. As far as I can tell, that's probably the author's chosen name for copyright purposes. Goodreads lists a lot of books by several authors named Christopher Allen. I'm hoping the pornographic books aren't his. Regarding Before the Thin Man, if he edited this by himself alone, that's pretty impressive. It's not perfect, but you know what book is perfect? None, so that's okay. However, I want to know what company did his print on demand because I don't want to use them for my two-part mystery. The prevalence of grammatical and formatting errors and punctuation mistakes make it clear it was printed without any passion or care for the author's hard work. That leads us to talk about the following. As you can see, the cover art and text are both quite fuzzy. There's also no way listed that you can send the author fan mail. Here are some more details I noticed if you would like to pause and read them. Trivia. Okay, I gotta share this. I don't want to ruin the surprise, but Allen repurposes a name from Another Thin Man. About the 42-minute mark in that film, officers ask Nora if she knows about all of Nick's previous girlfriends, and they mention a lighthouse keeper's daughter named Letty Finhattan, so I'm confused about why Allen gave this name to a specific different character. Heck, maybe he'll see this video and tell us in the comments. Chapter 4, page 27, Nick, Carter, and Secret Service dime novels are mentioned, and no, they don't have anything to do with the Backstreet Boys, sorry. Both of them are real book series. Nick Carter became comic books and eventually a radio program. In Before the Thin Man, Allen makes Nick and Nora's age gap 13 years, whereas it was 15 years in Hammett's novel. I never heard their ages mentioned in the movies, but they only seem about 10 years apart, so maybe Allen decided to split the difference. How it compares to the originals. The first priority is nailing the personalities of our two favorite characters, Nick and Nora. From both of them, we need to see sarcastic wit, humility balanced with dignity, intelligence, bravery, kindness, and observation skills. In my opinion, Allen gets really close. I was happy that the tense is first person, just like the original Hammett novel, and it's wonderful that the opening sentence places Nick Charles in a similar place to the opening of The Thin Man. I was sitting at my regular table at a speakeasy on 52nd Street. Of course he was. The author name drops a lot of familiar characters within the first 14 pages, making us feel at home, like Clyde Wynant, Macaulay, Rosewater, Colonel McVeigh, Dorothy, Studsy, Lieutenant Guild, and more. In my opinion, there aren't enough M-dashes and unfinished thoughts in Nick's conversations with Macaulay. In Hammett's novel, Macaulay kept hesitating to finish his sentences as if it was a regular bad personal habit, so this trait could have been carried over to the prequel. On page 21, we have a first in the Thin Man franchise, a car chase. Nick chases a robber who's running, but I'm gonna count it anyway. It was quick, exciting, and it shows us another side of Nick's methods without straying from believability. This doesn't feel like an unnatural part of the character thrown in just because the author likes car chases. Allen does let Guild get confused once or twice because Nick withholds information from him, just like in the movies, but it happens more in the Hammett versions. We get to meet Asta. For some reason, I had imagined that Asta was either Nora's dog or was adopted by Nick and Nora together. So it was a fun surprise to find Asta in Nick's apartment. However, in chapter 12, when Nick returns to his apartment, Asta isn't mentioned. I know it's important to cut sections that don't move the plot forward, but it kind of felt like there was a missing pet. One option would be simply to add a single quick sentence like, "As I entered, Asta greeted me in his usual happy way." A couple pages later, Nick walks to a hotel and is told he can't bring pets in. He starts talking about Asta, whom he's apparently walking with, but we weren't told that. The reader thinks Nick showed up to the hotel alone. By the way, because of Alan's book, I looked into a movie with Marion Davies called The Patsy. I found it for free at Tubi, and I happen to film a review of it if you're interested. Before the Thin Man stays true to an established theme of Nick knowing a lot of police officers and even the ME. One could say the story sets up Nick and Nora to become trauma bonded, which isn't always a great way to realistically build a lasting relationship. But before the trauma occurs, they already liked each other, so I would say it's not quite the same thing. Much like in my two-part mystery, we're going to see characters face a difficulty which strengthens their appreciation of each other. So while a trauma does occur, it's not the only reason for Nick and Nora's bond. Alan uses the old slang for glasses, cheetahs. In Hammett's screenplay, Another Thin Man, a character tells someone not to pick a fight with a certain man unless he's not wearing his cheetahs. Regarding Chapter 8, page 67, in Hammett's screenplays, Nick doesn't always explain directly what he's alluding to if the audience already understands what he's insinuating, so I don't think he would have been subtle in expressing concern about criminals being out at night, followed by the blunt statement, "In short, it's not safe." We already get that that's what he was implying, and Nick doesn't waste words. At the end of chapter 12, I feel like there was a missed opportunity for Alan to imitate Hammett's unique dialogue summary method. Nick and the hotel clerk swap some pleasantries that could have gone something like this. "I returned the key to the front desk clerk. I was welcome back any time, and it was a pleasure to help me and the police in any way he could. He had my thanks. Asta and I left." You save a couple paragraphs of dialogue that way. In true Thin Man style, Lieutenant Guild helps Nick gather all the suspects together for the climactic revelation. Another scene that was true to form was in chapter 29, when Nora gets to have a very exciting moment, but I don't want to ruin the surprise. In homage to the Thin Man formula, the last two lines of dialogue belong to Nick and Nora, with him saying something funny and her replying equally humorously. "I made my way." The water drinking game. When we find the author's favorite phrases, we're gonna hydrate. Much like Hammett or any other author, Alan seems to have favorite words and phrases. The only reason they stood out to me is because editors like BookFox and Ellen Brock warn us against overuse of linguistic idiosyncrasies. Guess who probably has a lot of linguistic idiosyncrasies in her unfinished mystery right now? So I ain't complaining. I made my way. I made my way. I made my way. Back, 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 back. Just. General comments. It's too funny on page 16 when Nick tells Macaulay he's not the marrying kind. Ha! Just wait, am I right? I love this quote from Letitia Van Hatten. "Make the most of the moment, but I intend to do so with the future in mind." I love that sentiment. I've met too many people who damaged their future, their reputations, their families, even their own bodies by saying things like, "Do what makes you happy and live for the moment." When that moment is over, they ended up hurt and regretful. So this quote strikes a good balance, in my opinion, with regard to having fun but also being wise. Colonel McVeigh is much more welcoming here than in the movie Another Thin Man. In this book, his affability extends as far as his saying that he wants everyone to feel at home. That is quite different from his paranoid, impatient attitude in the 1939 movie. But over time, people change, and of course, stressful situations can make us act rude. I'm going to be 100% honest, as always. While I read pages 35 to 37, where Letitia is talking to Nick, there were moments when I didn't like the conversation, and then there were moments when I really did. And I thought, this sounds like a fun conversation between Nick and Nora. I don't want to give away a spoiler, but there's a reason that the conversation felt familiar, so I have to give the author grand props for creating a dynamic in that scene that mimicked the original novel so well. Alan doesn't always utilize the page-turning method at the ends of the chapters. Nothing excites us to entice us to turn the page, except for general curiosity to find out what happens at the end of the book. Normally, as a writer, you want to end your chapters with a question, or a shocking revelation, or a physical motion. Maybe someone is literally getting into a car, saying, "I'm on the way." Read the Terry Blackstock novel Intervention for good examples of this method. I have a review of that too. In Chapter 6, Nick references The Great Gatsby when he first sees Colonel McVeigh's mansion, which is awesome because A, Gatsby is a good story, and B, it's the same thing people do today. We compare life situations to movies or books that we like. Compared to Hammett's novel and his Two Thin Man screenplays, there is much less ragging on law enforcement. Sometimes the author reuses words or phrases several times on the same page, in the way that we all do when we're word dumping our first or second draft. This is also a common habit in speaking out loud. It's easier for our brains to access the same words over and over rather than searching for synonyms and activating different neural pathways. So as a writer, that's why it's important to have a skilled editor to minimize these repetitions. However, I understand that if these repetitions are in the character's dialogue, this can be a clever method to build our characters. We all have favorite phrases we repeat in real life, so our characters should too. As y'all know, my videos are not sponsored, so if there are ads, I'm sorry, that's not in my control. Also, check out the Drunken Fish Writers Group podcast, and if you're interested in more Dashiell Hammett reviews, I have videos about The Thin Man and Return of the Thin Man. Judgmental inner editor thoughts. This is the part where I get too obsessive thinking about the editing advice I've heard from Kieran Westwood, Brandon McNulty, Ellen Brock, Abby Emmons, and Bookfox. So let's get judgy and nerd out over the details, cause finding the errors in what someone else writes is much easier than seeing our own mistakes, am I right? And to be fair, most of these issues don't influence the plot. As a dog mom, I'm confused about who takes care of Asta. For example, Nick stays overnight away from home more than once without Asta, and there's no mention of a dog sitter. At the end of Chapter 11, Lieutenant Guild says he needs Nick's help to bring Nora from Colonel McVeigh's house for questioning. Then a few paragraphs later, Nick tells Guild that Nora is at Colonel McVeigh's house, but Guild already clearly knew that. Now I know this is nitpicking, but in the sentence describing Macaulay as an old army buddy of mine from the war, I feel like that last phrase is redundant. An army buddy from the war. Well, yeah, he's not your army buddy from the circus. However, World War I was often dubbed the Great War, so maybe the author used this wording in honor of that? On page 30, Nick says, I noticed a few new, very shiny scratches around and going into the keyway. It looked as if someone had tried to enter the door with a different key, or possibly someone tried to use lockpicks. This feels like Alan is holding the reader's hand. We already understand the insinuation, so my version looks like, I noticed a few new scratches around and going into the keyway. In my investigations, I left a few of those marks myself on other people's doors. The author continues holding the reader's hand at little moments on occasion. By chapter 10, I wondered, well, I'll just be blunt, I wondered if in his time as a police officer and a detective, did he have conversations with people that were, like me, a little thick-headed? So maybe he had to explain himself more than once, and perhaps that habit comes through in his writing, which is understandable. In chapter 10, someone other than Nick calls Nora Nora, even though earlier it was established that Nick gave her that nickname in private, while other people were calling her something else. The fact that Nick is the one who nicknamed her that is confirmed in the last chapter as well, so why were other characters privy to the nickname and calling her that? In conclusion, I do recommend this book. It's a fine example of so-called fanfic, done with respect for the original author. But that's just my opinion as a big nerdy fan of the Thin Man franchise. I think Alan's eye for detail was honed in his careers, and it shows in his writing in spite of a couple mistakes. If only he was able to join forces with the original screenwriting team, Albert Hackett and Francis Goodrich, we could have a seventh Thin Man in 2026. Remember, compassion is love plus action. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day. One could argue that the... Hello. Stop falling down.